Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland, Majority Report. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program Saikat Chakrabarti. He is a candidate for Congress in California's 11th district in the primary. And if I am correct, that district is former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi's district.
You are correct. That's right.
Welcome to the program. I want to just start, give folks a sense of sort of your trajectory in the context of Democratic politics, because your story in many ways feels like it could be it's almost like a microcosm, reflection of an attempt that came out of the Bernie campaign in 2016 to reform the Democratic Party, and it feels like it's stalled a little bit. But tell us about, draw those parallels, if you would.
Yeah, so I worked on the Bernie 2016 campaign, the organizing team there, and there's a group of us who came out of that campaign who were really trying to recreate the sort of momentum that we saw on the Bernie campaign, but for Congress, and so we had this idea of trying to recruit hundreds of people all across the country to run for Congress on not just the Bernie stuff, but on kind of a transformative economic agenda. Our sort of feeling at the time was the big problems that a lot of people are facing in this country, just kind of stagnating wages, while the costs of things like healthcare, housing, education, childcare, that stuff have been skyrocketing, and people were really feeling squeezed and stuck. So we wanted to recruit this movement to go in and change the Democratic Party and really change all of Congress to actually tackle the big stuff. People in Congress, they love to work in a bipartisan way to rename post offices, but they never want to actually tackle the big stuff. So through that project, we didn't get to recruit hundreds of people, but we did recruit a handful of folks. And one of the people that came out of that was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We recruited her. I ended up running her campaign in 2018, where she was primarying a very powerful Democrat, the third most powerful Democrat at the time, a guy named Joe Crowley. And, it was a long shot campaign, but she won. And though we didn't get the, hundreds of people going into Congress sort of transformation, her victory did allow us to use that spotlight to try to push a lot of the ideas we were trying to push forward. And a lot of that turned into the Green New Deal, and so I ended up going into Congress with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as her chief of staff, helped her set up her office, was with her when she did her sit-in in Nancy Pelosi's office on day one of Congress, and try to help sort of quarterback and push the ideas of the Green New Deal into the mainstream. It was a very strategic move. At the time, there was a Democratic presidential primary going on. And as you guys know, in these primaries, the presidential candidates are trying to figure out ways to differentiate themselves. So we wanted to insert the idea of, can we build high wage industries to build a clean economy, to actually upgrade people's means of making a living in this country? We wanted to inject that idea into the primary, and we kind of got the presidential candidates to do an escalating arms race. And, Joe Biden had to respond with Build Back Better. That was his moderate plan, which was still bigger than anything anyone had proposed at that time amongst presidents. And so through that, I stayed with the AOC in Congress for about a year, and then hopped back out to actually work more on the policy side of stuff, which is what I've been doing for the last several years.
I imagine Nancy Pelosi you're not getting regular Christmas cards from Nancy Pelosi, would be my guess.
Yeah, we're getting dinner every Friday together. No,
well, that's good. It's good that you guys can go and have a beer at the end of the day with each other.
Right. Yeah. I mean, as you can imagine, it's really fun to get a beer with Nancy Pelosi. No, it's you asked about the parallels between back then and right now. A lot of the stuff we were trying to warn back then, and warn the party about and warn Nancy Pelosi about. I was in some meetings with Nancy Pelosi at the time, was that, look, if you guys don't actually come up with a transformative vision for how to fix people's lives, how to, reverse sort of the decline people are feeling, whatever right-wing move you're seeing now is going to come back to, bite you way harder in, 5 or 10 years. And that's exactly what's going on right now, So the parallels are like, people were sort of ready for change back then. I think people are really ready for change right now, and are looking for some sort of vision, something that's not just Donald Trump is bad.
Can you talk a little bit about that, though, and like the differences between 2018 and what it might look like for you to run in a primary in 2026? Because, the Ocasio-Cortez campaign, which you guys were masterful at, the Crowley depended a lot on low turnout, is my recollection, in the primaries before. Very low turnout compared to the population of the district. But when the primary race was over that night, when she defeated him, it wasn't close. And that was because your campaign with her turned out so many people who were less inclined to vote in a primary. How did you do that? And how do you think that you can maybe put that model into place in your campaign in 2026 when it's maybe a little bit of a different environment because we don't have, say, the upswing of Justice Democrats or the 2016 Bernie campaign with the wind at our backs.
Or the element of surprise.
Right.
For that matter. Like, Crowley did not see this coming.
Right.
He was way overconfident. Pelosi may be overconfident, but she definitely, I would imagine, knows that you're running.
Oh, yeah. She knows I'm running. I do think she might be a little overconfident, though. I don't think she's going to do anything in the race until it gets, until she feels very threatened. But I think there's some stuff that's going to be harder and some stuff that's easier. Emma, as you mentioned, it was a low turnout primary back then. But, AOC was part of this national movement, and there was some element of folks really calling for change. And that gave us some wind, and it allowed us to do a strong ground game and a bunch of campaign tactic stuff that let us pull out a win. The stuff that's going to be harder this time is it's a much larger district. The turnout's much higher in San Francisco, but the environment is also completely different. Back when we were running in the Joe Crowley primary, nobody serious would talk to us. Nobody wanted to work on the campaign. It was very difficult to actually get things off the ground. I'm noticing things completely different now. The folks I'm talking to I'm doing these voter calls every day. Tons of people who are kind of mainstream Democratic voters who've been voting for Nancy Pelosi their whole lives are showing up on these calls. And I'm not actually just trying to run this campaign in San Francisco. I'm calling for people to run all across the country. I'm trying to do something similar to what we did in 2018. I think we need people to run all over the country to completely reshape and redo the Democratic Party to be one that's about a transformative agenda if we really want to make a difference and win, not just in 2026, but in 2028. And like my experience or my sort of motivation for a lot of this is I think the kind of autocratic right we're seeing right now, it's not exactly the same, but it's similar to the kind of autocratic right and fascist movement in the 1930s. It's not the same thing, but it's being driven by a lot of same motivations. And I really feel like the only thing, the way we defeated that last time was you had FDR, you had a whole new movement, it was a New Deal movement, new people that came into government, and a whole new vision to rebuild government and to do the kind of upgrade in people's lives that created the whole middle class. We built the whole industrial base, we built a whole new economy, and that was good enough to show that liberal democracy can work, and it defeated the right for decades. And I think that's what we should be shooting for right now. We shouldn't just be shooting for the pendulum swinging back and forth. We need to actually show how we can improve people's lives in such a drastic way that we just put to rest the idea that, this sort of autocratic right can work and should be in power. But so if people are interested in that, I think I do want to run together with them. I want to make this a national movement. And because I'm running against Nancy Pelosi, who she's very entrenched, but she's better known than Joe Crowley, I get to, I get a bit more of a national platform to call for something like that.
I mean, the academic research shows that when the authoritarian right rises, when they have a built-in ideology, almost definitionally, and then creating narratives around events becomes much easier. 9/11 becomes about Islam, as opposed to, sort of the monarchy and people trying to maintain power. The financial crisis becomes about African Americans having home ownership, as opposed to the big finance. I mean, the center left, as it were, in this country has no. It's seemingly they feel like they need no ideology. And therefore, they cannot control the narrative of anything that happens, whether it's immigration, or any other.
Or what's the healthcare vision?
Crime, health, whatever it is. It's a real problem. Let me ask you this. Do you, if you are looking, and I hope, people see your candidacy as an opportunity to go and help you, at least, in our audience here. As far as that vision of having half a dozen, 24, people running across the country, do you have, from having had so much experience in an insurgent campaign and taking out entrenched people, because you're running in a very blue district. There's a lot of those blue districts where there's entrenched politicians who may not see, it coming, or are vulnerable because of this desire for change. I think we're seeing it in the New York mayor's race, to be honest with you. Have you guys set up any type of resource? How would you, for those people who are interested in running and being part of something bigger in terms of change, where would you direct them to?
Well, for now, go to my website, and there's a button on there that says "Run with Me," and click that and sign up. Because I actually, I don't actually start from the perspective of doing the sort of district by district analysis. I think it's exciting to start with the people who actually want to run and see who can really articulate this kind of a vision, who's exciting. And because I actually think the problems that San Franciscans are facing and a whole lot of folks are facing across the country are way more similar than people realize, and when I talk about affordability, the cost of housing, the lack of building housing, the cost of healthcare, education, all that stuff is in fact worse in my district than it is in a lot of places around the country. And so I don't think it's going to be just, trying to primary deep blue districts. I think we've got to find folks all across the country. So I'm not actually, I don't have a research up there about specific Democrats, but
okay, put aside that imposition, but like in terms of resources, do you have a handbook that says, all right, I'm running in Nebraska, and but I don't know what's the first thing I do type of situation?
Yeah, no, I don't have a handbook yet, but I'm trying to do calls with the folks who are going to sign up and trying to nominate people to start actually just organizing the team. That's kind of the approach I take to it. That's what we did when I did this with Justice Democrats and Brand New Congress, is we first started to get the team together, because I do think it's really important that we get everybody onto the same page about even doing this, acknowledging what the problems are and what we want to do, and then you can figure out the tactics for each district. But I wanted to talk really quickly about something you mentioned, about the centrist Democrats, and how they don't really have an ideology, so they're always playing defense. And another one potential resource that if anyone out there is interested in running, that I'd love for folks to check out. I've been working on something called the Mission for America with a bunch of people. It's at newconsensus.com. That's my think tank. So if you Google Mission for America and find it, and that's the kind of big, is the plan and the details of the kind of thing that I think Democrats should be running on. Of course, I'm open to feedback about it all, but I just want to throw it out there. If there's folks who are listening who are thinking about running, check it out and see if you're interested in this kind of thing.
Is there a need, though? I mean, in addition to and I have a sense of what that plan would be in terms of material benefits for folks ranging from housing and job, and maybe we have an idea for energy production, and but from an ideological standpoint, which functions as a rubric from which everything else emanates. It feels like that has not been articulated by the leadership of the Democratic Party. You know, I know Chuck Schumer says we will win, but it's not, there's not a lot that you can sort of like, there's no subsidiary narratives that can be developed from that. And they seem to be allergic to it. And it seems like there's room for almost like for two different narratives. One is within the primaries, right? Like, what are you finding thematically or narratively is the frustration that people have with Democrats now? That is coming out from those voters who would have, like, I voted for Nancy Pelosi every year. I never even thought about it.
Yeah, thematically, and I don't know if this is so ideological as it is just people are really divided on action versus inaction, or just kind of change versus status quo. They want Democrats to be doing more now, and they want Democrats to actually be more radical. And I see this from people on all sides of the political spectrum. People just want the big stuff to get fixed. In San Francisco, the cost of living has just been getting worse and worse for so long that people are willing to entertain way more radical ideas, and I think you see this all across the country. People are, you vote for Obama for change in 2008 and you vote for Trump for change in 2016 and 2024, two very different visions of change, but people just want change. And so I think there's this opportunity to actually present something that's real action. I think that's where the voters are. I think the story, from a more ideological standpoint, I think there's two narratives. One is our politicians have sort of just been lazy and like left, they've taken their hands off the wheels, and it's been easy for them to be lazy because they're getting funded by big donors. It's better for them to just kind of keep the status quo and which is good for their donors, and not do too much. And if they ever try to say something a little bit, that's like a real idea, they risk upsetting their donors. I saw that dynamic so often in my year in Congress. Stuff that would be very popular amongst a wide base of people in purple districts or red districts, the Congress people wouldn't want to touch because they would always be worried about, what the donors would think about that. But I think there's this other theme of we've just had, decades and decades of this transfer of wealth from the working class and middle class to the top, the richest people in this country. It's not even the top 0.1% or anything anymore. It's just the richest people in this country. And everyone feels that, and so whatever, I think the ideology has to come back to this point of we need to do things that will improve the broad, the prosperity and wealth of the vast majority of Americans. And it's not just, and it's not going to work to do nothing, because doing nothing is just going to continue that transfer of wealth.
And you're in a safe blue district, as Sam mentioned, obviously Nancy Pelosi in San Francisco. Does it change your calculation at all, given some of the polling that we're seeing coming out of Democratic voters and how they view leadership as having failed them right now? I mean, I've never seen this kind of reaction from people that might have been, say, supportive of a Nancy Pelosi in the past, but now, at least under Hakeem Jeffries, there seems to be, amongst even moderate and liberals, this anger about an inability to fight. Is that something you're incorporating into your campaign and tying Pelosi to?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say I was a part of the wave of the folks who are getting increasingly upset because of what I saw from the Democratic Party after the election. After Trump won again, I really thought the Democrats would have sort of this come to Jesus moment where they're like, all right, we screwed up big time. Let's go back and figure out what to actually change. And then, I saw Pelosi do an interview with Ezra Klein where she basically made the argument for why Democrats shouldn't change and did nothing wrong in the last election. And then you saw her, I'm sure you guys followed this, where she used her considerable power within the caucus to push AOC out from being head of the Oversight Committee, which is the main kind of communications organ of the Democratic Party. Whatever people think of AOC, everyone agrees she's an amazing communicator. And, she pushed her aside to get kind of her loyalist, Jerry Connolly, nice guy, but not the guy for the moment, to be the chair of the Oversight Committee. He's
also one of the most sprightly guys with cancer in Congress. I mean, we have to concede. And it only took literally 8 appearances on television before he could figure out to have his camera at eye level and a microphone to communicate to the American public. And he certainly was successful in making, he said, I think the quote is, they had to scramble at one point on the committee. So that is,
Yeah, I mean, to the point you made, Emma, about why are people so upset at the Democrats? It's because they got this culture where they're like a big company filing TPS reports. Donald Trump will say something crazy, and they'll be like, "Well, let's set up a press conference next week to discuss." and everything is seniority based. They just can't change, and they can't even imagine how they could have some sort of bigger vision because they don't believe in that, right? And that's why, the polling that you're talking about, Emma, I think is really showing that the time is right now to change the whole party. People are just sick of what the leaders are doing right now. And I don't think they can imagine people like Chuck Schumer suddenly changing, and having some sort of vision. It's like goes against every fiber of their being to be that way.
What is it that what do you in your opinion accounts for that? I mean, you mentioned like this dynamic with the donors, but staring them in the face is an example of of people who can raise money by small donations. I don't know if Ocasio-Cortez makes or Sanders make less, has less calling hours for themselves anyways, because they have small donors or more. I would imagine it's certainly not a huge, they're not doing that much more
Right.
with the small donors. I mean, so there's a model out there. So it's not like, is it just that these people don't believe in anything? Is it a corporate just risk averseness? And is it just simply, well, when I came into Congress in 1994, this is the way we did things, and Bill Clinton was triangulating, and we had to Tip O'Neill would have a beer with Reagan, and that was the lore, and McGovern was still hovering in the background, and we all thought we don't want to be a hippie. What are the factors that go into this? And maybe it's not that important, but it's maybe just a point of curiosity. But it also is a way of perhaps maybe there are some sort of more low-hanging fruit out there. I don't think Chuck Schumer's ever going to change, but there may be other politicians there who can be, retrained in some way.
Yeah. First of all, I know, at least from the horizon there, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez doesn't do any call time. So she gets to actually do her job when she's in Congress rather than spend all her time on the phone. But I think it's a lot of all the above. And I think it's a belief in not having a national message or national leadership. They hammered this home so many times when I was in these caucus meetings where they would talk about how everyone's got to run their own local race. And, they would really celebrate, the local news reporting on the number of potholes that got fixed. And that all sounds kind of good in theory, but the right does have a national message, and they're hammering it over and over, and they've got a plan, and they're telling you why your life is getting worse and why you need to, we need to kick out all the immigrants. So if you're not combating that with any sort of a national message and some sort of a vision on the other side, I think you're going to lose, and I agree with you. I actually think there are some people in the caucus who, if there was a different kind of leadership, would go along with that. But I don't think it's going to come from the folks that are in there right now on their own. I do think there's just this deep-seated, I think, it's a bunch of different reasons, different for different people. Some people are just in there as the kind of next step in their career. It's a lot of people just are afraid, if you say something, it can get used in an attack against you. And the Democrats just at their core believe that any messaging battle they're going to lose. So they don't even want to have them. They don't want to publicly fight for the things that they believe in, which half the time isn't anything. So that makes it difficult. There's all this, there's been such an argument of should Kamala have gone on Joe Rogan, and should the Democrats have done more oppositional media? And they're still not doing it. And they're still not going on, shows like this or shows on, all across YouTube and social media and the stuff that people are paying attention to, because what are they going to talk about? And Hakeem Jeffries is doing those shows, and you see what he talks about, and it's terrible. It's him just going on and making a case for doing nothing, which is, that's.
Well, he's being attacked from both the right and the left. So I think we know he's doing the right thing.
Yeah.
But that part about the idea of all politics are local is fascinating to me because the Democrats controlled Congress for 60 years. 50 years, and it was I think Tip O'Neill was probably the speaker for almost all of that, and it was his all politics are local. What has changed since then is that almost all media is national.
Yep.
And so this messaging, it's almost as if like they just have not been pulled into the late 20th century, never mind like the 21st century. It's terrifying.
Right.
And part of that is I do think they don't, when it comes down to not having a vision, I don't think the Democrats even agree that there's a problem. Like when I say something like, for the vast majority of Americans, life has been getting worse. Republicans will say that opportunistically, and they all say it. But the Democrats don't even agree on that. They don't actually even want to say that, because half of the time they're talking to people who don't have that problem and who don't want to talk about that problem, right?
Right.
I mean, do you think that that's it too? The constituency that the Democrats have sought actively, Chuck Schumer saying for every, blue collar worker we lose, we'll gain one in the suburbs. It seems like that vision has been tested and it's been an abject failure.
Yeah, and that was the part that was surprising to me after the election, is I thought this election was a test of that vision, and they seem to have doubled down on it, and it's not just that constituency. I want to be clear. It's also, Hakeem Jeffries going around just trying to do the VC apology tour. It's as if they really feel like the tech CEOs and people like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg went over to the right because we weren't nice enough to them. The right spent 2 years bashing those guys. They were bringing them into committee hearings over and over again, complaining about tech censorship, and they just bashed them into submission. And all those guys know that they have to go along with Donald Trump or they're gonna get attacked. And the Democrats' response to that is, let's be nicer to them and to try to convince them to come back to our side. That's never going to work in the first place. So, and also that's not how you win elections. That you're talking to the VCs of the world is not going to win you the next election.
It's fascinating to me. I can't tell if they're just like in such a tight bubble that they can't sort of step out and see what they're doing looks like to 85% of the country, 90% of the country, or if it is just sort of like a cultural thing. They just come out of some type of like corporate culture where this is just the way. I mean, I don't know. That was my feeling when we saw the three campaign people on Pod Save America. It was all like, this is a big CYA tour, so we're all here together, and we agreed that it's like headwinds. It was all headwinds.
Yeah, and I don't think it's got to be whole new people that come into a party, because it's not and they're not gonna get rid of people like Cuomo. I mean, Cuomo's making a comeback tour right now. It's nuts. Half the country, more than half the country, think both parties are corrupt. Of course, Trump's level of corruption is on a whole new astronomical level, but it doesn't matter. For the Democrats to actually make a case against Trump from any sort of, ground, the current people in there aren't going to be able to make it, because everyone knows, they're also bought out. They're doing insider stock trading. They're also playing the same games, and they've got no vision. So they're playing the same games, but they're on their back foot. So they can't win. I think the current party, just as it is. Maybe they can wait for a pendulum to swing back, but then it's going to swing back the other way, and it might be worse the next time.
All right. Before we let you go, I have to ask you, are you worried that if you do unseat Pelosi or that your challenge of Pelosi is going to impact the day traders who follow her portfolio, her stock portfolio, which apparently like performs incredibly well?
Yeah, why are you being an anti-economic populist?
And there are literally apps you can get to follow Nancy Pelosi's trades so that you can mimic those, and apparently it like outperforms the stock market by some, like, I don't know, 1,000% or something.
Yeah, it's I actually had a guy on a voter call last week who works at a company that Pelosi recently traded, and their stock went crazy right after. And he was like, look, voting for you is going to be worse for me personally, but we got to do it, you know? So I think I got the day traders too.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Where can people get more information? Where can they join you if they want to run? Where can they donate or volunteer if they're in the neighborhood? Where should people go?
So everyone should go to my website. It's saikat.us. I'm sorry, my name is hard to spell. Saikat.us. But you can also sign up for our Zoom call there. You know, whether you're in San Francisco or not. I'm doing calls with San Francisco voters every day, but I'm also doing a call with people all across the country once every couple of weeks, because I do want to try to organize this national movement. So you can sign up for a Zoom call with me there, and any help would be very much appreciated.
So, folks, if you're living in Virginia or you live upstate New York or you're in Nebraska or whatnot, and you're interested in running, I mean, it's helpful, and you know, people win in these situations. We will put a link to your website at majority.fm. Saikat Chakrabarti, really appreciate your time today. Wish you the best of luck, and we'll check in a couple of months, and hopefully you're going gangbusters.
Right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
All right. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.